Ha! My skin!
He watched in horror as his skin began to peel away, revealing python scales underneath. The woman he was about to marry screamed. But his wife? His wife just smiled. Because 15 years ago, she had made sure he could never truly leave her. And now, the serpents were coming to collect. Before we dive into this chilling true story from my community, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stories like these, real, raw, and absolutely haunting, are what we bring you every week. And trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The ceiling fan had been making that same clicking sound for 3 years now. Adanna lay in bed, counting the rotations, counting the clicks, counting the months, counting the years. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of watching her body betray her month after month. 15 years of pitying glances at family gatherings, of whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, of her mother-in-law's increasingly cold visits. Beside her, Ike snored softly, his chest rising and falling with the peaceful rhythm of someone who could still sleep without questions eating at his soul. They had done everything. Everything. Dr. Okonkwo at City Hospital had run every test imaginable. Adanna could still remember sitting in that too-cold examination room, her feet dangling from the table covered in crinkly paper, while the doctor reviewed their results with a perplexed expression. Mrs. Adanna, he had said, adjusting his glasses, I've reviewed both your and your husband's tests multiple times. Physically, there's nothing wrong. Your hormones are balanced. Your tubes are clear. Your husband's count is excellent. You're both perfectly healthy. Then why? Adanna had whispered, her voice breaking on that single word that contained 15 years of pain. The doctor had no answer. Neither did the specialist at St. Mary's. Neither did the renowned fertility expert they traveled for hours to see in the city. The answer was always the same, you're fine. Just keep trying. Sometimes these things take time. How much time? How much time before her husband's family stopped seeing her as a woman and started seeing her as a curse? How much time before Ike himself started to wonder if he'd made a mistake? She watched him sleep now, in the amber glow of the streetlights filtering through their curtains. At 42, he was still handsome, the same strong jawline that had made her heart skip when they first met at her cousin's wedding. The same broad shoulders she'd clung to on their wedding night, whispering promises of the family they would build. But lately, those shoulders seemed to turn away from her more often. It started small. So small she'd convinced herself she was imagining it. Ike began coming home later. Walk, he'd say, loosening his tie and heading straight for the shower. His phone, which used to sit carelessly on the dining table, now lived in his pocket, face down, always silent. Then came the new cologne. Adanna had been folding his shirts one Saturday morning when she noticed it, a scent that wasn't the one she'd given him for his birthday. Something sweeter. Something younger. And on the collar of his favorite blue shirt, a smudge of foundation 3 shades lighter than her own skin. Her hands had trembled as she held that shirt. The evidence was so small, so easily explained away. Maybe a colleague had hugged him. Maybe someone had bumped into him at a meeting. Maybe. But deep in her gut, in that place where women know things before their minds catch up, Adanna knew. Her husband was slipping away. The next week, she followed him. She wasn't proud of it. She'd driven her best friend Gozie's car, parked 3 blocks from his office, and waited. When Ike emerged at 7 p.m., he didn't head toward their neighborhood. Instead, he drove to the east side, to a small apartment complex where jacaranda trees bloomed purple against the evening sky. Adanna watched as a woman opened the door. Young. Maybe 25. Skin like polished mahogany and a smile that lit up when she saw Ike. The woman wrapped her arms around his neck, and I kissed her like a man who had finally come home. Adanna drove home in a daze, her tears blurring the streetlights into streaks of gold. Over the next 3 months, she discovered there wasn't just one woman. There were several. The young one in the apartment. A businesswoman he met at hotels. A hairdresser who worked near his office. Ike had become a man she didn't recognize. A man who collected women like trophies while his wife withered at home. The night she confronted him, Adanna had prepared a special dinner. His favorite, jollof rice with fried plantains and peppered goat meat. She'd set the table with lit candles, and waited. When I came home at 11, smelling of another woman's perfume, he found her sitting in the dark. We need to talk, she said quietly. Not now, Adanna. I'm tired. I know about the women. The silence that followed was so thick she could taste it. I didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He simply sighed, like she was being unreasonable for bringing it up. What do you want me to do? He finally said. We've been married for 15 years, Adanna. 15 years without a single child. Do you know what people say about me? Do you know how it feels to watch all my friends become fathers while you what? Her voice cracked. While you have to stay faithful to your wife. While you have to honor the vows we made before God. Those vows promised children. He was shouting now. They promised a family. What did I get instead? An empty house and a barren wife. The word hung in the air like poison. Barren. Adanna felt something inside her break. But beneath the breaking, something else was being born. Something desperate and dangerous and dark. Don't leave me, she whispered. Please, Ike. Whatever I've done wrong, whatever curse is on me, don't leave me. I'll do anything. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw pity in his eyes. Pity was worse than hate. I'm not leaving, he said tiredly. I just need some air sometimes. Some happiness. Can you understand that? She nodded, though she understood nothing except that she was losing him piece by piece, woman by woman, night by night. After he went to bed, Adanna sat at the kitchen table until dawn, her mind racing. She couldn't lose him. She wouldn't. They were bound by marriage, by years, by the ghost of the children they'd never had. If God wouldn't help her keep her husband, she would find someone who would. The herbalist compound sat at the edge of town, where the paved roads gave way to red dirt paths and the modern world seemed to hold its breath. Adanna had gotten the address from her sister-in-law, whispered in secret during a family gathering. If you're truly desperate, her sister-in-law had said, glancing around nervously, Boba Ogunlade can help. But his help comes with a price. I'll pay anything, Adanna had replied. Now, standing before the compound's entrance, she wondered if she should turn back. The gate was decorated with cowrie shells and dried herbs, and the air smelled of incense and something else. Something ancient and knowing. Come in, Adanna, a voice called before she could knock. I've been expecting you. Boba Ogunlade was older than time itself, or so it seemed. His face was a map of wrinkles, his eyes clouded with cataracts, yet when he looked at her, she felt utterly seen. You want to keep your husband, he said simply. It wasn't a question. Yes. Even though he doesn't want to be kept. Adanna's jaw tightened. He made vows to me. Before God and our families. Those vows should mean something. The old man studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. There is a way. But it will require both of you. You must bring him here willingly. He won't come. Then make him believe it's for something else. Tell him it's for the children you've never had. Tell him it's a blessing, a prayer, a ceremony for fertility. Men are simple creatures, they'll believe what they want to believe. Adanna felt a flicker of doubt. What will this ceremony do? Boba Ogunlade stood, moving to a darkened corner of his hut. When he returned, he carried a wooden box carved with symbols that seemed to ride in the lamplight. The Python Covenant, he said softly. In the old ways, pythons mate for life. They are faithful, fierce, and unforgiving to those who betray them. I will bind you and your husband together with the spirit of the male and female python. He may wander, yes. He may seek other women. But the old man's smile was cold. If any woman knows he is married and still chooses to continue with him, the pythons will claim her. And if he ever tries to truly leave you, to marry another while you still live, the pythons will claim him. The women will die. Adanna's voice was barely a whisper. If they persist after knowing the truth. The covenant gives them a choice, leave him alone, or face the consequences. But your husband. Boba Ogunlade leaned forward. Your husband will only face the pythons if he breaks the covenant completely. If he tries to marry another. If he tries to truly replace you. Adanna thought of the woman in the apartment, of her bright smile and young body. She thought of Ike's hands on another woman's skin, of his lips whispering sweet things to someone else. What must I pay? She asked. 7 years of your own health. Nothing severe, small ailments, minor pains. The pythons must feed on something. And Ike. What does he pay? His freedom. And possibly his life, if he's foolish enough to forget what he sworn. Adanna should have said no. Should have walked away. Should have trusted in God, in time, in the possibility that love could be enough. But she was tired. So tired of being not enough. Of watching her husband slip away while she stood powerless. I'll bring him, she said. Convincing Ike was easier than she'd expected. A fertility ceremony, she told him over breakfast. Boba Ogunlade is supposed to be very powerful. Maybe he can see what the doctors can't. Ike had been skeptical at first, but Adanna had begged, and perhaps he felt guilty enough about his affairs to grant her this small wish. They arrived at the compound on a Saturday morning. The ceremony took place in a clearing behind the main hut, where 2 earthen pots sat in the center of a circle drawn with white chalk. Boba Ogunlade emerged wearing ceremonial robes, carrying a calabash filled with dark liquid. We asked the spirits for fertility, he announced, his voice carrying across the clearing. For the blessing of children to fill this empty home. Ike relaxed. This was what he'd expected, prayers, herbs, the usual traditional medicine show. Give me your hands, Boba Ogunlade instructed. Both of you. He took a small blade and made shallow cuts on their palms. Adanna felt the sting, watched her blood well up and drip into one of the pots. Ike barely flinched as his blood joined hers. You are bound now, the old man intoned. Husband and wife, one flesh, one blood. What God has joined, let no man put asunder. Ike nodded approvingly. Bible verses. Good. But then Boba Ogunlade opened the second pot, and Adanna's breath caught. Inside, 2 pythons coiled together, one dark as midnight, one pale as moonlight. Their eyes gleamed with an intelligence that seemed almost human. What? Ike started to stand, but Boba Ogunlade's hand was surprisingly strong as it pushed him back down. The pythons blessed this union, the old man said, and began chanting in a language that predated the town, maybe predated the country itself. The snake slithered from the pot, moving toward the couple. Adanna forced herself to stay still as the darker python wound around her arm. Its scales were cool and dry, its weight surprisingly heavy. Across from her, Ike's eyes were wide with fear as the pale python coiled around his arm. Boba Ogunlade took their bleeding hands and pressed them against the snake's heads, mixing their blood with the creature's scales. Bound by blood, bound by covenant, bound by the ancient ones who remember when promises meant death to break them. Husband, you may wander, but you cannot leave. Wife, you may wait, but you will not be abandoned. And any woman who knowingly takes what belongs to another will answer to the pythons. Any man who tries to replace his wife will become what he has sworn to. The chanting grew faster, louder, until Adanna felt dizzy with it. The python's eyes seemed to bore into her soul, and for a moment, she swore she could hear its voice, hissing ancient promises in her mind. Then it was over. The snakes slithered back to their pot. Baba Ogunlade wrapped their hands with white cloth and gave them a knowing look. It is done. Go in peace, but remember, some debts are paid in flesh, and some promises last beyond death. On the drive home, Ike was quiet. Too quiet. What was that? He finally asked. That wasn't just a fertility ceremony. Does it matter? Adanna replied calmly. We are blessed now. Isn't that what we wanted? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That he'd agreed to something he didn't fully understand. He was right. Over the next few weeks, Adanna noticed a shift in herself. She no longer cried when I came home late. She no longer checked his phone or smelled his clothes for perfume. A strange calm had settled over her, like the quiet eye of a storm. She knew something that I didn't, that he was bound now. That he could wander, but never too far. The pythons would make sure of that. She started sleeping better. Started eating again. Her friends commented on how well she looked, how peaceful she seemed. They assumed she'd made peace with her childlessness, maybe even with her husband's infidelity. If only they knew the truth. The first sign that the covenant was real came 2 months later. Ike had been seeing a woman named Ifeoma, the businesswoman Adanna had spotted him with at various hotels. It had been going on for months, and Ike had grown comfortable with the arrangement. Ifeoma knew he was married. He told her early on, expecting her to leave, but she'd only laughed. I don't mind sharing, she'd said, running her fingers down his chest. Besides, your wife can't give you what I can. They'd been together at his usual hotel when Ifeoma started complaining of stomach pains. Severe pains that doubled her over. I called for an ambulance, his heart racing with panic. At the hospital, the doctors ran tests. Ran more tests. Couldn't find anything physically wrong, but Ifeoma kept screaming, kept clutching her stomach, kept insisting that something was eating her from the inside. Snakes, she gasped at one point, her eyes rolling back. I can feel snakes inside me. The doctors assumed delirium. They gave her pain medication, kept her for observation. She died 3 days later. Cause of death, acute systemic failure of unknown origin. I attended the funeral in a daze. He'd cared for Ifeoma, enjoyed her company, and now she was gone. And her last words kept echoing in his mind, I can feel snakes inside me. He remembered the ceremony. The pythons. Baba Ogunlade's strange chanting. No. It couldn't be. These things didn't happen. This was the 21st century, not some ancient village. Ifeoma's death was a coincidence, a tragic medical mystery, nothing more. He told himself this even as he noticed Adanna's knowing smile when he came home from the funeral. I'm sorry about your friend, she said sweetly. Too sweetly. I hope she rests in peace. Ike felt a chill run down his spine. For the next year, Ike was careful. He still had his affairs, old habits died hard, but he never told the women he was married. If they asked, he'd say he was single, or he dodged the question entirely. And he made sure to end things before they got too serious, before questions about his home life became inevitable. The memory of Ifeoma's death haunted him, but he convinced himself it was unrelated. Just coincidence. Just bad luck. Until Patricia died. Patricia had been different from the others. She'd been his secretary for 3 years, and their affair had started slowly, almost accidentally. Late nights working on reports. Shared dinners. A kiss that led to more. She'd asked about his personal life once, and in a moment of weakness, or perhaps testing the covenant, Ike had told her the truth. I'm married, he'd said. But it's complicated. We can't have children, and things between us are dead. He'd expected her to leave. Most women would have. But Patricia had just smiled sadly. I understand, she'd said. Everyone deserves happiness, even if they have to find it outside their marriage. 2 weeks later, Patricia called in sick. A fever, she said. Nothing serious. The fever never broke. Ike visited her in the hospital, washed her waste away in just 5 days. The doctors were baffled. Her organs were shutting down one by one for no apparent reason. And in her delirium, she kept talking about snakes, about being squeezed, about not being able to breathe. Make them stop, she'd begged Ike, her hand gripping his with surprising strength. Please, make the snakes stop. She died before he could ask what she meant. Ike sat in his car in the hospital parking lot for 3 hours after Patricia's death. 2 women. Both had known he was married. Both had continued the relationships anyway. Both had died mysteriously, raving about snakes. The pythons. His hands shook as he drove home. When he walked in, Adanna was cooking dinner, humming softly to herself. What did you do? He asked quietly. She turned, her expression innocent. I'm making your favorite. Egusi soup with pounded yam. What did you do at that ceremony? I helped us, Ike. I made sure we'd stay together. Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be? Forever. Women are dying. Women who knew you were married, Adanna replied calmly, stirring the soup. Women who deliberately chose to destroy another woman's home. The covenant gives them a choice, walk away or face the consequences. Patricia chose poorly. Ike felt his world tilting. This couldn't be real. His wife couldn't have. You can't kill people with magic, he said, trying to sound confident. That's not possible. Adanna set down her spoon and walked over to him. She took his face in her hands, and her eyes were utterly calm, utterly certain. I didn't kill them, my husband. They killed themselves by staying. Just like you kill yourself if you ever try to truly leave me. That's what you agreed to. That's what you swore to, whether you understood it or not. She kissed his cheek and went back to cooking. Ike stood frozen, understanding at last the depth of the trap he was in. For the next 3 years, Ike was a changed man. He still had his affairs, but he never told another woman he was married. If they got too close, too curious, he'd end things immediately. He'd seen what happened to those who knew the truth and stayed anyway. He began to hate Adanna. Hate her calm smiles, her peaceful acceptance of his infidelity, the way she chained him to her with blood and snakes. But he couldn't leave. He'd watched 2 women die. He wasn't ready to be the 3rd victim. Then he met Chisholm. It happened at a business conference in Abuja. She was there representing her company, and I noticed her immediately. Not just because she was beautiful, but because of how she carried herself. Confident. Intelligent. Genuinely happy in a way he hadn't seen in years. They started talking at the hotel bar. Just talking. And for the first time in his marriage, Ike found himself opening up to someone, really opening up. About his frustrations, his regrets, his feeling of being trapped in a life he hadn't chosen. He didn't mention Adanna. Didn't mention being married. But something about Chisholm made him want to. They saw each other again the next month when business brought him back to Abuja. Then again. And again. What started as friendship bloomed into something deeper, something Ike hadn't felt since he first met Adanna 20 years ago. Love. Real, genuine, terrifying love. Chisholm was everything he dreamed of. She was kind and funny and understood him in ways Adanna never had. With her, he felt like the man he was supposed to be, not the cheating husband trapped by supernatural forces. After 6 months, Chisholm invited him to meet her parents. They'll love you, she said, her eyes shining. And then maybe we can start planning our future together. Our future. Marriage. A life with Chisholm. The thought filled him with equal parts joy and terror. He should tell her. He knew he should tell her about Adanna, about the covenant, about everything. But he was terrified that if he did, she'd leave. And he couldn't bear to lose her. She was his last chance at happiness, at a real life. So he said nothing. He decided he'd find a way to divorce Adanna quietly. He'd pay her off, give her the house, give her everything. Surely that would satisfy the covenant. He wasn't leaving her destitute, he was just moving on. People did it all the time. The Pythons would understand. They had to. The traditional marriage ceremony was set for a Saturday in December. Chisholm's family had been welcoming, if a bit puzzled about why they'd never met any of Ike's relatives. He'd explained them away, said his parents were deceased, that he was an only child, that his extended family lived far away. More lies on top of lies. The night before the ceremony, as Chike was packing his things, he noticed something strange. A patch of skin on his arm felt rough. Dry. When he looked at it in the bathroom mirror, his blood ran cold. Scales. Small, yes. Barely visible. But unmistakably scales, patterned like python skin. His hands shook as he touched them. They were real. Hard and dry and wrong. No, he whispered. No, no, no. He scrubbed at them with soap, with a washcloth, with everything he could find. But they wouldn't come off. Because they weren't on his skin, they were his skin. The scales spread overnight. By morning, his entire forearm was covered. The texture was horrifying, his own flesh transformed into reptilian armor. He called in sick to work, cancelled his plans with Chisholm, and locked himself in his apartment, staring at his arm in horror. This was the Covenant's response. He was trying to replace Adanna, trying to marry another woman while his first wife still lived. The Pythons were claiming him, just as Boba Ogunlade had warned. He grabbed his phone and called Adanna. Come to my apartment, he said urgently. Now. Please. She arrived within the hour, looking unsurprised when he showed her his scaled arm. It's getting worse, he gasped. Make it stop. Please, Adanna, make it stop. I can't, she said simply. Only you can stop it. How? Cancel the marriage to Chisholm. Forget her. Come home. But I love her. Adanna's face hardened. You loved me once too. You swore vows to me. Or have you forgotten? That was different. We were young, we didn't know. We didn't know I couldn't give you children, Adanna finished bitterly. Is that what you were going to say? That if you'd known I was barren, you never would have married me. The silence answered her question. I've lived with your rejection for 15 years, Adanna said quietly. I've watched you chase after younger women, prettier women, fertile women, while I waited at home like a ghost. I've endured your family's pity and your mother's scorn. And through it all, I stayed. I honored our vows even when you didn't. So yes, Ike. I made sure you'd have to stay too. Was that wrong? Maybe. But I'm not sorry. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. The scales will spread until you're more python than man. Eventually, your organs will change. Your bones will soften. You'll lose the ability to stand, to speak, to think like a human. You'll become the thing you swore to, loyal, bound, and utterly trapped. Unless what? Unless you break things off with Chisholm. Publicly. Tell her you can't marry her, that you made a mistake. The pythons need to know you've abandoned the attempt to replace me. And if I don't? Adanna met his eyes. Then I hope you enjoy eating rats and basking on warm rocks. Because that's all you'll be capable of in a few weeks. She left him there, scales spreading up his shoulder, his chest, his neck. I tried everything. He went to churches, had pastors pray over him. They anointed him with oil, declared the scales a demonic attack, commanded them to live in Jesus' name. The scales remained. He went to hospitals. Dermatologists were baffled. Geneticists took samples. No one could explain how human skin was transforming into reptilian scales. One doctor suggested psychiatric evaluation, implying it might be psychosomatic. If only. He even tried to go back to Baba Ogan Lade, but when he arrived at the compound, it was empty. The gate hung open, the hut abandoned. Neighbor said the old man had left months ago, that he'd packed up overnight and vanished. Whether he died or simply moved on, no one knew. The covenant remained, enforcing itself without its creator. And the scales kept spreading. Within a week, they covered his torso. They'd reached his face. Ike stopped leaving his apartment, terrified of what people would see. He told Chisholm he had a terrible flu, that he couldn't risk getting her sick before the wedding. Maybe we should postpone, Chisholm suggested gently during one of their phone calls. Just until you're feeling better. No, he said too quickly. No, we can't postpone. I need to marry you. He needed her to save him. To prove that love could be stronger than covenants, that a future with her could break the chains of his past. But deep down, he was beginning to understand the truth. There was no escape. He had made a vow, sealed in blood and spirit, and the pythons would hold him to it. The scales reached his face 3 days before the wedding. Ike stood in front of his bathroom mirror, watching as the transformation crept across his cheek, his chin, his forehead. His eyes were changing too, the pupils elongating, becoming vertical slits. When he opened his mouth, his tongue seemed longer, forked at the tip. He was becoming the thing he'd sworn to. Loyal, cold-blooded, and utterly inhuman. That night, in desperation, he called Chisholm. He had to tell her. Had to warn her. Had to give her a chance to run before she was bound to a monster. Chisholm, he said when she answered, his voice strained. There's something I need to tell you. About me. About my past. Is everything okay? You sound strange. I'm married. Silence on the other end. What? I'm married. I have been for 20 years. I should have told you from the beginning, but I fell in love with you, and I thought I could just leave her and start over. But I can't. There's something binding me to her, something I can't break. He heard Chisholm's breathing, sharp and quick. You're married, she repeated, her voice hollow. This whole time, you've been married. I was going to divorce her. I am divorcing her. I just need time. You lied to me. To my family. We've been planning a wedding, Ike. A wedding for a man who's already married. I know, and I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but please listen. Why are you telling me this now? 3 days before the wedding. Is this some kind of joke? I'm telling you because you need to know the truth. Because if we go through with this marriage, something terrible will happen. There's a covenant, Chisholm. A binding between me and my wife. I can't marry you. I can't. A covenant. Her voice turned cold. So not only are you married, but you're blaming it on some superstitious nonsense. What kind of man are you? Look at me, he shouted. Come to my apartment and look at me. See what's happening because I tried to leave her. I'm not coming anywhere near you. This engagement is over. The wedding is cancelled. And I never want to hear from you again. She hung up. Ike dropped the phone, a strange mixture of relief and devastation washing over him. It was done. He'd ended it. He'd pushed away the woman he loved, the future he dreamed of. Surely the pythons would be satisfied now. But when he looked in the mirror, the scales continued to spread. Down his arms, across his hands, over his fingers. His nails were hardening, turning into claws. He called Adanna, his voice breaking. I ended it. I told her everything. Why isn't it stopping? Because you tried, Adanna said simply. You tried to replace me. The covenant doesn't care that you failed. It cares that you attempted it. You brought her to the point of marriage, Ike. You chose her over me. What do I do? He was crying now, watching his hands transform. Please, Adanna, tell me what to do. A long pause. Come home, she finally said. Come home and accept what you are. Accept that we are bound, that we'll always be bound. Beg the pythons for mercy, and maybe they'll let you remain human. And if they don't, then at least you'll be my python. Mine to keep. Mine to hold. Mine forever. She hung up. Ike drove home at 2 a.m. when the streets were empty and no one could see his face through the car window. His hands could barely grip the steering wheel. The scales had covered them completely, and his fingers were starting to fuse together. His joints ached with the effort of maintaining human posture. Every instinct screamed at him to call up, to find a warm, dark place and coil into himself. The house was lit when he arrived. Adanna had been waiting. She opened the door and looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Horror. Pity. Satisfaction. Come in, she said softly. Ike stumbled inside. The living room had been rearranged. The furniture pushed to the sides, creating an open space in the center. And there, coiled on a large cushion, were 2 pythons, one dark, one pale. The same ones from the ceremony. They've been here for 3 days, Adanna said. Waiting for you. I can't. Ike's voice was failing, his throat restructuring. I can't become this. Please. Adanna knelt beside the pythons, running her hand over the dark one's head. It seemed to nuzzle into her palm. Do you remember our wedding day? She asked quietly. You looked so handsome in your suit. And when you said your vows, I believed every word. I believed you'd love me forever. I believed we'd build a life together, raise children together, grow old together. We can still. But you stopped loving me, she continued as if he hadn't spoken. Maybe when the doctor said I was fine but we still couldn't conceive. Maybe when your friends started having children and we had none. Maybe it was gradual, so slow neither of us noticed until the love was just gone. Replaced with resentment and blame. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want this either, Ike. I wanted us to be happy. To be normal. To go to the hospital and have them fix whatever was broken and come home with a baby. But that didn't happen. And instead of facing it together, you ran to other women. And I ran to darker things. I collapsed to his knees, his legs no longer able to support him properly. The bones were softening, reshaping. He looked at his wife, this woman he'd shared 2 decades with, this woman he'd betrayed again and again, this woman who'd bound him with serpents. I'm sorry, he gasped. Adanna, I'm sorry. For all of it. For the affairs, for the blame, for trying to leave you. I'm sorry. She wiped her tears and walked toward him. The pythons followed, slithering across the floor with purposeful grace. Sorry doesn't undo what's been done, she said. But maybe it's a start. She knelt before him and took his transformed hands in hers. The scales felt wrong against her skin, but she didn't pull away. The covenant was supposed to keep us together, she whispered. But I never asked if that's what you truly wanted. I forced you to stay, Ike. I trapped you. And now look what I've done. For the first time since the ceremony, Adanna's mask of calm cracked completely. She sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I was so afraid of being alone. So afraid of being the woman everyone pitied, the one whose husband left her because she couldn't give him children. I thought if I could just keep you, even if you hated me, it would be better than losing you completely. But I was wrong. This isn't love. This is prison. The dark python raised its head, its eyes fixed on Adanna. She met its gaze and spoke, her voice trembling. Release him, she said. Please. I release him from the covenant. Let him go. The python's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. Then, slowly, it began to move toward Ike. Ike flinched, expecting pain, expecting death. But the snake simply coiled around his scaled arm, its body warm against his transformed skin. The pale python joined it, winding around his other arm. The room seemed to shimmer. The air grew thick with that same ancient power from the ceremony. And Ike felt something. A loosening. A chain breaking. But the scales remained. Why isn't it working? Adanna cried out. I released him. I took it back. The dark python turned its head toward her, and impossibly, Ike heard words in his mind. Not spoken, but understood in some primal way. The breaking was his choice. The payment is his price. Release does not mean reversal. No, Adanna shook her head frantically. No, that's not fair. I'm the one who made the covenant. Punish me. You suffer your own price. 7 years of health, remember. But he chose to break the vow. He brought the second wife to the altar. The pythons must be honored. Ike understood then. The covenant could be released, Adanna could free him to live, to divorce him, to marry him if she'd still have him. But the transformation. That was the price for attempting to break a sacred vow. That couldn't be undone. There has to be a way, Adanna was pleading now, her hands clasped. Take me instead. Take my life, take anything, but don't let him become this. The pythons were silent, coiled around Ike's arms like living jewelry. Ike looked at his wife. Really looked at her for the first time in years. He saw the grey hair she tried to hide with dye. The lines around her eyes from nights spent crying. The way her hands trembled even now, reaching toward him despite everything. She'd done a terrible thing. But so had he. They destroyed each other, piece by piece, year by year, until nothing remained but desperation and dark magic. Adanna, he said, his voice thick and strange from his changing throat. It's okay. It's not okay. Look at you. I know what I look like. He held up his scaled hands. I know what I'm becoming. But you were right about one thing, I did make a choice. I chose to pursue Chisholm knowing I was married. I chose to plan a wedding knowing I'd already had one. I chose to break the vow. Because I trapped you. Because I gave you no choice. You gave me a choice, I said quietly. I could have stayed faithful. I could have honored our marriage even without children. I could have talked to you, gone to counseling, tried to fix what was broken between us. Instead, I ran. And I kept running until there was nowhere left to run to. He looked at the pythons, at their ancient eyes. If this is the price for my choices, then I'll pay it. But Adanna. He reached out, his scaled fingers touching her face. I need you to let me go. Not from the covenant but from your heart. Find someone who can love you the way you deserve. Have the life you were meant to have. Without you. I'm already gone, he whispered. I've been gone for years. We both know it. Adanna closed her eyes, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. She knew he was right. The man she'd married was already dead, had died slowly over years of disappointment and resentment. This creature covered in scales was just the physical manifestation of what had happened to their marriage long ago. I don't know how to let go, she admitted. Neither do I can manage something like a smile. But maybe that's what we both need to learn. The pythons unwound from his arms and slithered back to their cushion. The dark one's voice echoed in both their minds. The covenant is broken. The marriage is ended. But the transformation is complete. He tried to shed his old skin for a new one, now he will shed his human skin for eternity. Adanna felt something release in her chest, a tightness she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. What happens now? She asked. Ike looked down at his body. The scales had stopped spreading, but they covered him almost completely now. His legs were fusing, his spine elongating. Soon he wouldn't be able to stand at all. I don't know, he said. But I can't stay here. People will ask questions. The authorities. There's a place, Adanna interrupted. My father's village. Deep in the forest. There's a sacred grove where pythons are worshipped. Protected. The elders there. They might know what to do with you. How to help you live like this. You do that. After everything. After everything, she confirmed. It's the least I can do. Maybe it's my penance too. They left before dawn. Adanna drove while Ike lay in the back seat, covered with blankets. The scales had reached his face completely now, and his features were becoming less and less human by the hour. The village was 8 hours away, deep in the countryside where cell phone signals died and the old ways still held power. Adanna's elderly uncle met them at the edge of the sacred grove, his face unsurprised when she unwrapped Ike. The Python Covenant, he said simply. We haven't seen one in 40 years. Boba Ogunlade's work. Adanna nodded. He was always too free with the old magic. It has its place, but this. He shook his head. Bring him to the grove. The others need to see. The sacred grove was a clearing surrounded by massive Iroko trees. Stone altars sat at the cardinal points, and dozens of pythons, real ones, wild ones, basked in the morning sun. They raised their heads as Kike was brought in, scenting the air, recognizing one of their own. The village elders gathered, their faces grave. They examined Ike, consulted among themselves in hushed tones, and finally the eldest woman spoke. He is between worlds now. Not fully human, not fully serpent. The transformation was interrupted when the covenant was released. He will not become fully python, but he will never be fully man again either. Is there no cure? Adanna asked desperately. Cure? The old woman laughed, but not unkindly. Child, he broke a blood covenant sealed with ancient power. He is lucky to be alive at all. The spirits could have simply killed him. Then what do we do? He stays here. In the grove. The pythons will accept him, they already have. See. She pointed to where several large pythons had coiled around Ike's transformed body, not threatening, but almost welcoming. Like they recognized him as family. He will live among them, the elder continued. Neither fully animal nor fully human. He can speak, can think, can understand. But he cannot return to the human world. Not like this. Ike had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he spoke, his voice more hissed than words. And my wife. All eyes turned to Adanna. The elder studied her. You released the covenant. You are free. Free to live, free to remarry, free to live the life you wished for. The pythons have no claim on you. Adanna looked at Ike, at this creature that was once her husband. 20 years of marriage. 20 years of joy and pain, of love and betrayal, of hope and despair. All of it had led to this moment, in this grove, with these ancient witnesses. She could leave. Could go back to the city, file for divorce, start over. She was only 43. There was still time for a new life, maybe even for children with someone else. All she had to do was walk away. But when she looked at Ike, she didn't see a monster. She saw the man who'd made her laugh on their first date. Who'd carried her over the threshold of their first home. Who'd held her when each negative pregnancy test broke her heart a little more. She saw the man she'd loved. The man she'd hurt. The man who'd hurt her back. And she saw something else, a chance, perhaps, to finally do the right thing. How long will he live? She asked the elder. Pythons can live 50 years or more. With his human mind and our care, perhaps longer. 50 years. A lifetime. Adanna took a breath. I'll stay. Adanna, no, I started, but she held up her hand. Not because of the covenant. Not because I'm trying to trap you. But because. She paused, searching for words. Because I started this. Because my fear and my selfishness brought us here. And because maybe, if I stay, if I help care for you, if we learn to actually talk to each other without all the pain and resentment, maybe we can both finally heal. You can't give up your life for me. I'm not giving it up. I'm choosing it. There's a difference. She turned to the elder. Is there a place I can stay? I have some savings. I can help the village, contribute. The old woman smiled. There is always room for those who choose healing over hatred. Yes, child. You can stay. 7 years passed. The village accepted them both, the serpent man and the woman who stayed. Adanna learned the old ways, learned to make medicines from forest plants, learned to weave and farm and live a simpler life than she'd ever known in the city. Ike lived in the grove, among the pythons who had claimed him. He couldn't leave, his body was too transformed, too visible, too impossible to explain to the modern world. But he wasn't entirely a prisoner either. He could speak, could think, could even use his specially fused hands to do small tasks. And most days, Adanna would come to the grove. They'd talk. Really talk, in a way they never had during their marriage. About their fears, their regrets, their dreams. About the life they'd had and the life they'd lost. It wasn't the marriage they'd planned. It wasn't even really a marriage anymore, not in any traditional sense. But it was something. A connection. A commitment to seeing each other through the consequences of their choices. One afternoon, as Adanna sat at the edge of the grove, she felt a strange flutter in her stomach. She'd been feeling ill for weeks, had assumed it was something she ate or perhaps the stress of her new life. But this flutter felt different. Familiar, somehow, though she couldn't place why. She sought out the village healer, the same elder who had judged Ike 7 years before. The old woman examined her, then looked up with knowing eyes. You're pregnant, she said simply. Adanna's world tilted. That's not possible. I'm 49. The doctor said. The doctor said you were physically fine. They couldn't explain why you didn't conceive. But sometimes, child, the body knows things the mind doesn't. Sometimes we hold on to things so tightly, our pain, our fear, our need to control, that we leave no room for miracles. But I can't. Adanna's voice trailed off. The elder smiled mysteriously. The spirits work in strange ways. You gave up your old life. You released your hold on your husband. You chose healing over revenge. Perhaps this is their answer. Perhaps this is what you always needed to do, let go. Adanna walked to the grove in a daze. She found Ike basking in the afternoon sun, his scaled body draped over a warm rock. I'm pregnant, she said. His head snapped up, his vertical pupils fixing on her. What? I don't understand it either. But I am. The healer confirmed it. They stared at each other across the clearing, across the years of pain and betrayal and redemption. After all this time, Ike whispered. After everything we did to each other, after we destroyed our marriage, after I became this, now. Now, Adanna confirmed. She started to laugh, a slightly hysterical sound. God has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't he? To her surprise, Ike laughed too, a strange, hissing sound that was nonetheless unmistakably laughter. The cruelest joke of all, he agreed. The child we always wanted, finally coming when I can't even hold it. Adanna's laughter faded. I'm sorry, she said for the 1000th time. I'm so sorry for all of it. I know. I'm sorry too. They'd said it before. They'd say it again. But maybe that was part of healing, acknowledging the hurt over and over until it finally started to lose its power. What will you tell the child? Ike asked. About me. Adanna thought for a moment. The truth. That their father loved me, that I loved him, that we both made terrible mistakes, and that love isn't always enough, but healing might be. And that even when we're broken beyond repair, life finds a way to grow in the cracks. She placed a hand on her stiff flat stomach, feeling the flutter again. We'll bring them here, to the grove. They'll know you. Not as a husband, not as the man you were, but as, whatever you are now. Whatever we've both become. Who closed his eyes? It wasn't the life he'd dreamed of. Wasn't the family he'd imagined. He'd never hold his child, never teach them to ride a bike or throw a ball, never walk them down the aisle. But he'd be there. In whatever way he could. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. The pythons coiled around him, their bodies warm and solid and real. In the distance, he could hear Adanna walking away, back to the village where she'd built a home for their unexpected miracle. And Ike thought that maybe, just maybe, there were worse punishments than this. At least he was still here. At least he could still see the sky, feel the sun, hear his wife's voice. At least they'd both finally learned what the covenant had tried to teach them all along, that binding someone to you isn't the same as keeping them, that love can't be forced, and that some prices are paid not in death, but in living with who we've become. The dark python rested its head on his scaled chest, and I closed his strange, slitted eyes, and for the first time in 7 years, felt something like peace. Some covenants are made in love. Some in fear. But all of them demand a price that's rarely clear until it's too late to turn back. This story comes from my community, from real events that haunt those who witness them. The names have been changed, but the lesson remains. Desperation makes us do terrible things to the people we claim to love. And sometimes, the cage we build for others becomes the one we live in ourselves. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the relationships in your own life, hit that like button and subscribe. We tell stories like this every week, real stories from real people, about love and betrayal, about magic and consequences, about the darkness we all carry inside. Leave a comment telling me. Would you have made the same choice as Adanna? Would you have stayed for those 7 years, caring for the husband you cursed? Or would you have walked away and started fresh? And remember, the most binding promises aren't made with words or blood or pythons. They're made in how we treat each other, day after day, choice after choice, until we become either the person we promised to be, or the monster we swore we'd never become. Until next time, remember, some stories are warnings. This is one of them.